The night air of Beverly Hills shimmered with a golden glow, alive with a flash of paparazzi, cameras, and the hum of luxury cars pulling up to one of the most coveted restaurants in the city. Hell's Gold, Gordon Ramsay's crown jewel. Inside, the scent of white truffle risotto mixed with the delicate notes of a live string quartet. Guests draped in designer suits and glittering gowns filled the tables, each moment curated like a scene from a film. But as the velvet rope fluttered and the door creaked open, in walked a man who seemed to belong everywhere and nowhere at once. Keanu Reeves. No tuxedo, no Rolls Royce waiting outside. He wore weathered boots, a soft gray linen shirt, and a jacket that had clearly seen more stories than any red carpet. A faded leather satchel rested on his shoulder, the kind of accessory that spoke of journeys rather than status. He moved with the calm poise of a monk stepping into a temple, yet the reaction was immediate. A young waitress named Chloe, new to Hell's Gold but already intoxicated by its image, spotted him instantly. Her sleek bun and crimson lips were as polished as her disdain. In her eyes, Keanu looked out of place, unworthy of the golden glow that bathed the room. "Excuse me, sir," she said sharply, blocking his path before he reached the hostess stand. "This is Hell's Gold. Are you sure you're in the right place?" Laughter rippled from a nearby table, the kind that burns colder than silence. Keanu simply paused, his face calm, his voice gentle as falling rain. "I'd like a table, please." Chloe narrowed her eyes, offering him the worst seat in the house, a dim corner near the service exit. She dropped the menu with a dull thud. "This should be comfortable for you." Keanu glanced at the cracked tile floor, at the flickering light above, and then smiled faintly. "Perfect. Thank you." He didn't flinch. He didn't resist. He simply sat in the shadows, his calm presence already unsettling those who thrived on judgment. "And before we dive deeper into this story, let me ask you something. Do you believe dignity should be reserved only for the rich and famous? If your answer is no, then you're in the right place. Subscribe now and join us, because the story you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about kindness, power, and respect. The restaurant buzzed like a cathedral of indulgence. Crystal chandeliers threw golden light across polished tables. Laughter rose like champagne bubbles, and every plate carried the weight of Gordon Ramsay's reputation. But in the forgotten corner near the swinging door to the dish pit, Keanu Reeves sat alone, tracing the edge of the menu with quiet curiosity. Chloe returned moments later, her heels clicking sharply as if to remind everyone she belonged to the stage of elegance. She placed a glass of water on his table, spilling drops without wiping them. "Still or sparkling?" she asked flatly. "Still is fine," Keanu replied with his usual calm. Chloe leaned closer, her tone dipped with poison. "Just so we're clear, there's a dress code here." "It's usually enforced," he simply nodded. "I'll keep that in mind." She turned away, muttering under her breath, "Unbelievable." Across the dining room, an elegant woman in a pearl gown whispered to a partner, "Isn't that Keanu Reeves?" He squinted. "No, it can't be. What would he be doing here looking like that?" Meanwhile, Keanu placed his order with no hesitation. The legendary beef Wellington, Gordon Ramsay's signature dish. Not for prestige, not for spectacle, but for craft. Yet Chloe stalled. She wandered from table to table, refilling glasses for executives and influencers, laughing louder with food bloggers, and treating Keanu's presence like a stain in her perfect picture. Minutes dragged on. Keanu didn't complain, didn't signal for help. He simply waited, composed, as if silence itself were his shield. To Chloe, his patience was infuriating. "He won't last until," she whispered to a coworker. "Men like him never do. They order big and bolt when they see the check." But Keanu didn't move. He was still like a mountain weathering a storm. Around him, murmurs began to ripple. Some guests recognized him, others speculated. Whispers spread. Why was this man so familiar yet so unassuming, being treated like a nobody? And still, Keanu remained the same, calm, unbothered, quietly watching. The storm was only beginning. The minutes stretched into an hour. Dishes clattered behind the kitchen doors. Servers floated from table to table with polished smiles. And yet Keanu Reeves still sat with nothing but a glass of water. His chosen dish, the beef Wellington, had never even reached the kitchen line. Chloe hadn't entered it. She was too busy soaking in attention, adjusting a guest's napkin like a stage prop, laughing just a little too loudly at jokes she didn't find funny. From across the room, an older gentleman with silver hair and an immaculate navy pocket square observed silently. His name was Charles Holloway, a food critic whose quiet words could elevate or bury a restaurant. He didn't yet know Keanu's identity, but he recognized something greater. A man who refused to break under humiliation. His eyes narrowed. "This isn't arrogance I'm seeing, this is grace under fire." At the back, Keanu remained steady. His chair creaked, the table wobbled, and still he exuded a patience that unsettled Chloe more than any outburst could have. When she finally approached with a breadbasket, she dropped it on the table with a thud. "Our sourdough is made in-house," she said coolly, her gaze flicking to his boots. "Though it's usually paired with the tasting menu. Might not be the experience you're looking for." Keanu inhaled deeply, smiled gently, and replied, "It smells wonderful. Thank you." Her crimson lips pressed thin. She wanted him to fumble, to complain, to show weakness. Instead, his composure became a mirror, reflecting her own cruelty back at her. Meanwhile, whispers thickened across the golden-lit dining room. A woman in pearls murmured again, "That is Keanu Reeves. Why is he being treated like this?" Her partner leaned closer. "Because she doesn't realize who he is." But the truth was harsher. It wasn't about fame, it was about humanity. And before I go on, let me pause and ask you, have you ever witnessed someone treated unfairly because of how they looked? What did you do? Share it in the comments. Your voice matters here. And if you want more stories that reveal the power of kindness and dignity, make sure you're subscribed. These lessons aren't just stories. They're reminders of how we should live. The hum of the restaurant continued, but tension threaded through the golden air. Guests were starting to notice. A junior server named Mia, barely 19 and only 2 weeks into the job, passed by Keanu's table carrying a She slowed, her brow furrowing. His table was empty. No appetizer, no refill, nothing but still water and untouched bread. She approached Chloe quietly. "Excuse me," she whispered. "That man at table 19. Has he been served anything yet?" Chloe rolled her eyes so dramatically it was nearly theatrical. "Oh, him. Don't waste your time. He'll be gone before the main course. He's not a priority." "But he's been waiting for almost half an hour," Mia pressed. "And he's been nothing but polite." Chloe's expression hardened, her words sharp. "This isn't a charity. This is hell's gold. If you want to last here, stop thinking like a server and start thinking like a brand. That table doesn't matter." Mia bit her lip, torn between obedience and instinct. Keanu's quiet patience tugged at her conscience, but Chloe's presence loomed like a shadow. She walked away, tray still trembling in her hands. Across the room, Charles Holloway set down his wineglass with deliberate care. He had seen the exchange, the dismissive gestures, the arrogance masquerading as hospitality. He whispered to his companion, "She's playing with fire, and she doesn't even know it." Back at table 19, Keanu folded his menu and leaned back slightly. His gaze drifted to the pianist tucked into the far corner. The young woman played Debussy with delicate fingers, each note fragile yet full of soul. Keanu offered her a small nod of appreciation. She noticed, smiled shyly, and her music gained new warmth. Finally, an appetizer arrived, late and unceremonious. Chloe set it down with a dull thud. "The mushroom tartare," she said coldly. "You've had tartare before, right?" Keanu looked at her, unshaken. "Yes. This looks wonderful. Thank you." He closed his eyes for a moment as he tasted it, savoring the craft, appreciating the detail. Then he nodded, serene as ever. And in that calm silence, Chloe's armor began to crack. By now, the whispers had turned into a current running beneath the golden chatter of the dining room. Guests leaned toward each other, their eyes drifting toward the dimly lit table by the service exit. Some recognized Keanu instantly, others simply sensed there was something extraordinary about the man who sat so patiently, treated like an outsider yet carrying himself with quiet dignity. Mia lingered near the service station, her order pad clutched tightly in her hands. She glanced toward Chloe, who was now laughing with a group of crypto investors, pouring wine with theatrical flourish. The contrast gnawed at Mia, the shallow performance at one table and the blatant neglect at another. Finally, unable to hold back, she murmured again, "He's been waiting over 40 minutes. Shouldn't we—" "Enough, Mia," Chloe snapped, her voice a low hiss. "Look at him. Worn boots, thrift store jacket. He doesn't belong here. And I'm not wasting hell's gold on someone who doesn't understand its value." But in the shadows, Keanu wasn't rattled. He sat with the patience of someone who had already seen the best and worst of humanity and learned not to let either define him. He took another sip of water, his gaze soft but unyielding, a quiet presence that unsettled Chloe more than any outburst ever could. Across the restaurant, Charles Holloway scribbled something in his small leather notebook. He had reviewed world-class kitchens across 5 continents. But what he was witnessing tonight wasn't about food, it was about character. And character, he knew, could make or break a legacy more than any plate of beef Wellington ever could. When Chloe finally returned, her tone dripped with condescension. "Have you decided yet, sir, or would you like help understanding the options?" Keanu met her gaze calmly. "I'll have the royal beef Wellington, please." She blinked. "That dish is $420, not including sides or tip." He nodded gently. "Sounds excellent." Her smirk faltered. She wanted him to back down, to flinch, to betray even a flicker of discomfort. But Keanu only offered a faint smile, as if he already knew something she didn't. And in that moment, the power shifted. Chloe didn't punch in the order. Instead, she circled the dining room like an actress in search of her spotlight, stopping to refill glasses, to chat with producers, to pose with influencers. All the while, Keanu's table remained untouched, the Wellington unmade, the silence heavy. In the kitchen, the air was alive with heat and rhythm. Flames leapt from copper pans, knives chopped in rapid precision, and sauces simmered under the watchful eyes of sous chefs. But one detail stood out on the ticket screen. Table 19 still had ante placed, and Gordon Ramsay himself frowned as he plated a dish, his hawk-like eyes narrowing. "Who ordered the Wellington 40 minutes ago and it's still not in the system?" he barked. A young chef stammered, "Table 19. Chef, it was never entered." Ramsay's jaw clenched. "Then where the hell is it?" No answer came. The fire in the kitchen flared hotter, but in the dining room Keanu remained calm. He sat in his dim corner, a mountain of composure in the middle of a storm. Guests began to sense it too. They noticed the imbalance, the cruelty hidden under Chloe's perfect smile, and the rare patience of a man who had every reason to walk out but chose not to. Mia hovered near the station again, her voice trembling. "Chloe, this isn't right." "He's no one," Chloe snapped. "Stop wasting your sympathy." But that was when Charles Holloway's pen finally stilled. He no longer scribbled. He simply watched, every detail etched into memory. He whispered to his companion, "She doesn't realize she's not humiliating him, she's humiliating herself." And this entire place. The tension built like a string pulled too tight. Guests shifted in their seats, sensing the storm before it broke. The pianist faltered for a moment, uncertain, before continuing her melody, and then the kitchen doors burst open. Gordon Ramsay stepped into the dining room. The chatter died instantly. Forks froze mid-air. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Gordon didn't walk, he stormed. His eyes locked onto table 19 and Keanu Reeves looked up. The dining room froze under Gordon Ramsay's presence. His white chef's coat gleamed under the chandelier's sleeves rolled high, jaw clenched like a vice. He cut through the restaurant with long purposeful strides, parting waiters and guests alike, as if the very air obeyed him. At table 19, Keanu rose slowly, his eyes calm, steady. For a moment the two men locked gazes, one fiery, one serene, a clash of worlds in absolute silence. Then Gordon spoke, his voice carrying through the gilded room. "Mr. Reeves," he said, tone clipped yet respectful, "I wasn't informed you'd be joining us tonight." The restaurant gasped. Mr. Reeves. The name echoed like a revelation. Chloe froze near the wine station, her face draining of color as realization struck. She had humiliated not just a guest but Keanu Reeves. Keanu bowed his head slightly. "I didn't want a scene. I just wanted dinner." "You didn't get one," Gordon replied, his voice sharp as steel. He turned slowly, his gaze pinning Chloe like a spotlight. "Explain yourself," she faltered. "Chef, I didn't know who he was. I thought." "Thought what?" Ramsay's voice cut like a knife. "That he didn't belong here," she whispered. The air grew heavy. Diners leaned forward, their hearts pounding, their curated lives cracked open by raw truth. Gordon's voice dropped, lethal in its precision. "He is this place. He believed in it when no one else did. He invested in Hell's Gold during the darkest days of the pandemic. Not for recognition, not for fame, but because he wanted a restaurant that treated everyone the same." Gasps rippled through the room. Chloe's knees buckled. She had spent the evening scorning the very man who had saved the house she worshipped. Keanu lifted a hand, his calm more powerful than Ramsay's fury. "Let's not shame her," he said softly. "Let's teach her." And in that moment, the real lesson began. Before we go on, if you believe respect should never depend on appearances, let me invite you subscribe now and join a community that values kindness above status. Share your voice in the comments. Your perspective matters. The room held its collective breath. All eyes were on Chloe, trembling in her polished heels. Her mask of confidence shattered. Her lips quivered as Gordon pressed forward. "What exactly did he do wrong?" he demanded. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her throat was dry, her mascara beginning to blur. "I thought he didn't meet our standard," she whispered. "Our standard," Ramsay repeated, his voice rising just enough to echo across the room. "Our standard is service. Our standard is dignity. Our standard is respect. You served ego, not excellence." Chloe's eyes brimmed with tears. "I didn't know who he was." "That's not the problem," Gordon shot back, pointing toward Keanu without turning. "The problem is that you thought he was no one." A murmur rippled across the tables, a wave of shame rolling through the glittering crowd. People shifted uncomfortably, realizing how many had looked away, how many had stayed silent. Keanu stepped forward, his voice calm yet piercing. "I didn't come here to be treated differently. I came here because I believed in what this place stood for. Tonight, this wasn't just about food. It became a mirror, and what that mirror showed us wasn't flattering." The crowd hung on every word. His presence wasn't loud, yet it filled the room. Charles Holloway, the critic, rose from his seat, wineglass in hand. "He's right," he declared. "Humility is louder than ego." Applause broke out, soft at first, then swelling, filling the golden hall with something richer than truffle and champagne. Sincerity. Chloe lowered her head, broken but awakened. Ramsay crossed his arms. "You're not fired, but tomorrow, you'll start from the dishwasher's pit. You'll learn what service truly means." The lesson was clear. In the house of fire and fame, humility had stolen the show. As the applause softened, the energy in the restaurant shifted. Conversations that once buzzed with luxury now hummed with reflection. Guests returned to their seats, but their posture was different. Straighter, softer, a little more human. Keanu remained standing beside the table that had been meant to humiliate him, now transformed into a stage for truth. He drew a breath, his words deliberate. "I've been in many rooms," he began. "Rooms full of money, ego, and influence. But what happened here tonight matters more than any award or headline. Dignity isn't a gift reserved for the rich. It's what we owe each other as people. Heads bowed, glasses were set down. Even phones slipped quietly into pockets as every eye locked onto him. He turned to Chloe, whose apron was crumpled in trembling hands. You judged me tonight, but you weren't the only one. Many of us stayed silent, and silence is also a choice. Everyone belongs where there is kindness. The words echoed like a sermon, not preached from a pulpit but lived through example. Gordon Ramsay stepped forward, arms folded, his voice stripped of fire, filled instead with weight. I've shouted at a lot of people in my life, but what Keanu just said, that hits harder than anything I've ever thrown. A soft ripple of laughter loosened the air, but truth lingered heavier than gold. Ramsay's voice grew firm. Hospitality isn't just plating food, it's plating respect. Keanu nodded. There's a difference between being humbled and being humiliated. Tonight, Chloe, you felt the first one, and it can be a gift if you let it. Her lips trembled. I'm sorry, Mr. Reeves, I truly am. He offered her a gentle smile. Show it, not with words, but with how you treat the next stranger who walks through that door. The chandeliers dimmed slightly as the night drew to its end. Guests left in pairs and clusters, but their conversations had changed. Instead of gossip about influencers or critiques of the wine list, they spoke in hushed tones about what they had just witnessed, a lesson more nourishing than any meal. In the emptying dining room, the staff gathered in a loose semicircle around Keanu and Gordon. Their faces, once masks of performance, were bare now. Some were nervous, others thoughtful, but all were attentive. Keanu stood beside the same wobbly table he had been assigned hours before. This wasn't supposed to be a speech, he began softly, but tonight deserves one. You all work in one of the most high-pressure industries in the world. I understand that, but pressure is never an excuse for prejudice, and an image is never a replacement for empathy. Silence settled, not out of fear, but out of respect. His words carried weight because they were lived, not rehearsed. You never know who walks through your doors, he continued. You never know their pain, their story, or their past. But you do know what you can control, how you make them feel while they rehear. Mia, the young server, wiped a quiet tear. The pianist, now seated among the staff, bowed her head in gratitude. Even Chloe, apron folded like a flag of surrender, lifted her chin to meet his gaze. Tonight hurt, Keanu said, but pain teaches, if we let it. And humility. Humility is the most underrated skill in any profession. He paused, letting the truth settle. Kindness doesn't have to be loud, but it does have to be consistent. And in that moment, Hell's Gold was no longer just a restaurant. It was a classroom. The staff stood in silence, their polished confidence replaced by something raw, something real. Keanu's presence had shifted the very foundation of the room. No spotlight, no entourage, no stage, just the undeniable weight of character. Gordon Ramsay, who had built his empire on precision, fire, and discipline, stood with arms crossed. But for once there was no storm in his eyes, only reflection. I've screamed at chefs for burning scallops, for overcooking lamb, but tonight wasn't about food, it was about culture. And I needed the reminder to. He glanced at his team, his tone firm but softened by honesty. You don't build greatness by serving gold leaf and champagne. You build it by serving people, by treating every guest like they matter. Keanu nodded. Exactly. You build a world-class restaurant not by what's on the plate but by how people feel when they leave. If they walk out with dignity, respect and warmth, then you've done more than feed them. You've nourished them. Chloe's eyes brimmed with fresh tears, but this time they weren't from shame alone, they were from awakening. I'll earn it back, she whispered. All of it. You will, Gordon said, his voice clipped yet reassuring, and it starts tomorrow. From the bottom, because the bottom is where service begins. Mia, standing in the circle, drew a trembling breath. He changed the whole room without raising his voice, she whispered. The pianist beside her nodded in agreement. Keanu smiled faintly. Kindness doesn't have to shout, it only needs to show up. And if it shows up consistently, it transforms everything. For the first time all evening, the staff weren't just workers in a restaurant. They were students, witnesses to something unforgettable. And the lesson wasn't Ramsay's, it wasn't Hell's Gold's, it was Keanu Reeves's. The restaurant was nearly empty now. The velvet ropes outside had loosened, the paparazzi lights had faded, but inside Hell's Gold, a glow lingered that wasn't from chandeliers, it was from reflection. Keanu placed a hand on the edge of the wobbly table that had started it all. Hours earlier it had been the worst seat in the house, a place meant for humiliation. Now it was the very spot where dignity had been served. This table, he said softly, almost to himself, is proof that sometimes the quietest corners hold the loudest truths. He lifted his jacket from the chair and slung it over his shoulder. For a moment, he looked at the staff gathered before him, at Gordon Ramsay standing tall, at Chloe with her folded apron, at Mia with hopeful eyes. He nodded once. You don't change the world with grand gestures, he said. You change it with how you treat the person in front of you, when no one is watching. The words lingered like embers. Then Keanu walked out the same way he came in, without fanfare, without spectacle, Leaving behind a silence richer than applause, Gordon turned to his staff. "We're not just serving plates here, we're serving character. Let this night be burned into your memory." Someone whispered from the back, "He didn't just change the room, he changed us." And in the hush that followed, everyone knew it was true. Because Keanu Reeves didn't need a spotlight to lead. He led by example. And sometimes, that's the only light the world really needs. Before we close, I'll ask you one final time. If this story moved you, share it. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss more stories that prove kindness still matters. And tell us in the comments, do you believe true class is something you wear or something you show? Your answer might inspire someone who needs to hear it today. The night outside Beverly Hills sparkled as if unaware of the storm and the lesson that had just unfolded within Hell's Gold. Limousines purred down the boulevard, cameras flashed, and yet the true story of the evening wasn't tea out there. It was in the quiet corner of the restaurant that had been transformed into a place of revelation. Inside, the staff lingered long after the final guests had left. The clinking of glasses, the scraping of chairs, the bustle of service, all gone. What remained was reflection. Chloe sat apart from the others, her apron still folded, eyes swollen from tears. Yet for the first time, she wasn't thinking about herself or her image. She was thinking about the man who had endured her cruelty with patience instead of anger. Mia approached her gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You know," she whispered, "if someone like him can forgive you, maybe you can forgive yourself too, and start again." Chloe nodded, her voice faint. "I don't deserve it, but I'll try. I'll learn." Across the room, Gordon Ramsay gathered his senior staff. His voice, usually fire and thunder, was calm now. What happened tonight wasn't just a guest experience. It was a wake-up call. We don't build legacies on ego, we build them on respect. And if we ever forget that again, then Hell's Gold isn't worth a damn. The team listened, their heads bowed. For once, it wasn't a lecture, it was a confession. Keanu Reeves' absence was felt more than his presence had been. His words, his calm, his refusal to lash out had left an imprint deeper than any celebrity cameo or critic's review ever could. Hell's Gold wasn't the same anymore, and none of the people inside it would ever be the same again. Later that evening, Charles Holloway, the critic, sat at his desk overlooking the Los Angeles skyline. His pen hovered above the page, but this time he wasn't writing about the beef Wellington, the wine pairing, or the truffle risotto. No, tonight's review wasn't about food, it was about humanity. He began his piece slowly. Hell's Gold is a restaurant where the chandeliers shine, where every plate is crafted like a masterpiece. But last night, it wasn't Gordon Ramsay's menu that stole the show. It was the quiet dignity of a man who sat in the shadows and turned them into light. He paused, sipping his wine, the words flowing effortlessly now. "We often think luxury is defined by price tags, velvet ropes, and exclusivity. But Keanu Reeves reminded us that true luxury is how we treat one another when there is no applause, when there is no recognition, when there is nothing to gain." As he wrote, Holloway realized this review would be different from all others. It wouldn't critique the flavor of sauces or the crispness of garnish. It would critique hearts, choices, and values. And perhaps, it would redefine what dining and life itself should mean. Meanwhile, somewhere across the city, Keanu Reeves walked quietly down an empty street. Unnoticed, jacket slung loosely over his shoulder, he blended into the night, as he always did, disappearing from the spotlight that sought him. Because for Keanu, the night was never about exposure, it was about truth. And that truth had already changed a room full of strangers. The following day, news of the event began to ripple beyond the restaurant walls. Guests who had been present recounted the story over breakfast tables, in phone calls, and across social media. Some spoke of Gordon Ramsay's fiery defense, others of the waitress's fall from arrogance. But most spoke of Keanu Reeves, not as a movie star, but as a man who turned humiliation into a lesson on humanity. Clips surfaced online. A diner had discreetly filmed the moment Ramsay stormed out of the kitchen. Another caught Keanu's calm response. Soon, the internet buzzed. "Keanu Reeves teaches respect at Gordon Ramsay's restaurant." Headlines framed it as scandal, but the truth felt more profound than gossip. Inside Hell's Gold, the staff began their shift differently that morning. The usual chatter about celebrities and reservations was gone. Instead, there was a quiet determination. Mia straightened the silverware with care, remembering Keanu's words. Chloe reported to the dish pit, her hands raw from work she had once looked down on, each plate a reminder of humility. Gordon walked through the kitchen, his tone sharp but charged with new weight. "No guest is invisible," he said. "No table unworthy. Not ever again." The lesson had taken root, and far away, Keanu Reeves sipped his coffee in a small cafe, unnoticed by those around him. He didn't check headlines, didn't need the praise. For him, the moment had never been about proving himself. It had been about holding up a mirror, one that forced everyone from staff to diners to ask themselves who they were when no one was watching. Sometimes, the greatest revolutions begin in the quietest corners. Weeks later, Hell's Gold welcomed its guests once more, but something had changed in its golden glow. The chandelier sparkled as always. The menu dazzled with Gordon Ramsay's genius. But the energy was different. Softer. truer. Servers moved with fresh intention. They no longer sized up guests by their shoes or their suits. Instead, they welcomed each one with equal warmth. Mia thrived, her natural kindness finally valued. Even Chloe, now humbled and reshaped by weeks of backbreaking work, returned to the floor with new eyes. She greeted each guest sincerely, carrying scars of her lesson, but also the strength it gave her. Charles Holloway's review had since gone viral. Critics across the globe echoed his words. True luxury isn't the price of the plate. It is the dignity with which it is served. Reservations poured in, not just for the food, but for the story, for the culture, for the lesson etched forever into Hell's Gold's walls. One evening, as Ramsay passed through the dining room, he paused at the corner table, the one by the service door, with the flickering light and uneven leg. No longer forgotten, it had become a place of quiet pilgrimage. Guests requested it now, wanting to sit where Keanu Reeves once sat, to feel even a trace of the humility that changed an empire. And though Keanu never returned to bask in the echo of that night, his presence lingered. In every dish served with respect, in every smile offered without judgment, in every corner transformed by kindness. Because Keanu Reeves hadn't just changed a restaurant, he had reminded the world that true class isn't worn, it's shown, and that dignity, given freely, is the finest dish anyone can serve.